Hey there, viewers. What started as testimony quickly turned into something no one was prepared for. After Diddy's adopted daughter exposed disturbing details about his so-called Red Room sessions, he lost control, lashing out in front of the entire courtroom. The scene was chaotic, and what she revealed before it happened was even worse. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The drawing she left behind. I've been working at the shelter going on 9 years now. Some days it feels like a calling, other days like I just never figured out how to leave. It's not glamorous, cracked floor tiles, buzzing lights, too few beds, and too many rules, but it's quiet enough, the kind of quiet that fills in around your bones. I used to clean homes in Beverly Hills before this, dusting mantles while people pretended I wasn't there, folding clothes that cost more than my rent. Listening, I got used to hearing things that weren't meant for me. Now I hear different things. Things the girls won't say out loud. They come and go, most of them. 14 to 23, on paper at least. Runaways, placements gone wrong, probation transfers, ghosts in denim jackets. Sometimes they cry the first night. Sometimes they punch walls. Sometimes they sleep for 2 straight days and don't eat until you slide a sandwich under the door like you're feeding a scared animal. But eventually, most of them talk. They say enough to make it clear why they ended up here. You hear the same stories. Bad stepdads, party drugs, wrong cars, long silences. But every once in a while one comes through who don't fit any of that. She came in quiet, no intake name, just a laminated card from a third-party transport that said she was part of a private behavioral reassignment. That's not one of our usual terms, but she had paperwork, so we signed her in. First name listed as Marla, last name redacted. No age, no emergency contact, just a date of pickup 3 weeks later and a footnote. Temporary emotional observation, tier 3. I'd never seen that tier before, and I didn't like that there was no picture on file either. Marla didn't ask questions. She didn't ask for more blankets or different food or even Wi-Fi access. She chose the top bunk, even though the bottom was empty, and she kept a small sketchbook tucked under her pillow. No one told her to draw, but she did. Every morning, like clockwork, pencil only, no color, always in the common area, at the farthest corner of the art table by the window. Her posture never changed, back straight, eyes unfocused, hands moving like they were tracing something that already existed. She didn't laugh at the other girls' jokes, didn't flinch when a fight broke out 2 bunks over, didn't even react when one of the others tried to snatch her sketchbook and got bit for it. Not a word, just a sharp look that made even the loud ones pause. I'd seen girls with tough shells, but this was different. She wasn't guarding herself. She just wasn't here. Not completely. After 3 days, I started watching her more closely. Not out of suspicion, but out of something else. Curiosity, maybe. Her drawings weren't of people or things she could have seen in the shelter. One day, it was a stage with no audience. Another, a long hallway with 1 black door at the end and numbers scribbled along the walls like a countdown. Then she drew a chandelier with tiny cameras for crystals. Each picture was deliberate, as if it were a memory, not a design. It was the 6th day when I found the one she left behind. I'd come in early to prep breakfast, nothing special, just oatmeal and powdered eggs, and found her bunk empty. No sign she'd even slept there. That wasn't unusual. Sometimes girls walk the halls when they can't sleep, but something felt wrong. Her sketchbook was sitting on the art table, wide open. That had never happened. She always packed it back under her pillow, like it was more valuable than the rest of her belongings combined. I walked over and looked. The room in the drawing wasn't familiar. It wasn't supposed to be. Velvet-lined walls, deep red, a low circular ceiling with a single camera in the center, like an unblinking eye. No furniture except 3 people standing side by side, 2 of them in shadows, but the third looked almost like him. You know the one I mean. I won't say his name, but the sunglasses, the chin, the rings. It was him, just standing there watching, hands behind his back like it was a performance. At the bottom of the page, one word was written in thick block letters. Rehearsal. It touched the paper. It was still warm, like she'd just finished it and walked away. But she was gone. Not in the bathroom, not in the laundry room, not in the yard. We checked the cameras. Nothing. She hadn't been seen since the lights went out the night before. They filed it as a walk-off. It happens sometimes. Kids run, sometimes they show up at another center, sometimes they don't. But I knew better. That girl hadn't run. She'd disappeared like a ghost, slipping through a wall she knew was there all along. I kept the drawing, tucked it in my old metal filing cabinet under the front desk, locked it. I don't know why I didn't report it immediately. Maybe I was afraid no one would believe it. Maybe part of me thought she'd come back, ask for it. Instead, I made a call. There's a woman I know, used to be a social worker before she burned out. She helps places like ours navigate the gray zones. I asked her to come by, showed her the drawing. She stared at it for a long time, didn't blink much. Finally, she said, "This isn't a sketch. It's a memory map." I didn't know what that meant. She said she'd seen a girl once who did something similar, came from a high-profile home, said she wasn't allowed to speak at certain times, only to draw, said she had to perform her trauma through pictures or else forget the script. They called it silent rehearsal in her intake. That girl disappeared too, different state, different facility. But the drawings were the same style, clean, clinical, observational, like architectural diagrams of pain. I felt sick. We agreed to scan the drawing and store a copy, but when I went back to the cabinet the next day, the original was gone. No sign of forced entry, just the lock, still intact, still shut. The paper file it was in, empty. I asked the receptionist. She hadn't seen anyone go near it. We don't have cameras pointed at the desk. No reason to. No one ever steals paperwork, but it was gone, like it had erased itself. That night I had a dream, not about her exactly, about the room, the red walls, the slow hum of a camera lens adjusting focus. In the dream I was standing in her place, drawing. But when I looked down, my paper was blank. I wasn't drawing. I was tracing something someone else had already drawn, over and over again. And in the corner of the page, there was that word again, rehearse. I woke up sweating. I didn't talk about it again for a long time. Didn't mention her to the other girls. But every so often one of them would draw something. An eye in the ceiling, a chair with restraints, a hallway that curved where it shouldn't. They never said it meant anything. Said they just felt like drawing it. But I could tell. They weren't drawing from imagination. They were remembering, even if they didn't know it. And now, every time a new girl comes in, I check their intake papers twice. I ask about sketchbooks. I ask too many questions. Because I keep thinking about what that woman said. It wasn't a sketch. It was a map. And somewhere someone still knows how to read it. Chapter 2. Asset Transfer. A27. Guardian signature missing. I never planned to end up in this line of work. I used to track down deadbeat dads and insurance frauds. Now I chase shadows, paper trails no one wants to admit ever existed. The kind of cases that start with a whisper and end with someone telling me to forget it ever happened. I used to forget. But that was before I opened the file on Asset A27. The folder came through an encrypted drop. No sender, just a QR code that directed to a private server with a 24-hour auto-destruct countdown. I'd seen systems like this before, usually cartel or tied to non-extradition business filings offshore. This wasn't that. The first thing I saw was a line of text at the top of the PDF. Transfer request, juvenile holding tier 3B, asset ID, a 27. That alone didn't make much sense. But the signature block below was blank. where it should have said legal guardian approval. There was just a box stamped pending attestation, code red. No one stamped something pending unless they planned to forget about it. The intake listed a date, October 2nd, 2012. Origin, unnamed holding facility, Nevada. Destination, private estate under contract to a media conglomerate registered in Delaware, but the delivery address listed wasn't a rehab center or adoption agency. It was a mansion in Holmby Hills, known in real estate circles for only staying on the market for a few months at a time, always under new names, trusts, shells, never a single family for long. I didn't know what to call this job yet. It wasn't about locating a person, at least not directly. It was about proving she ever existed in the first place. A girl with no birth certificate, no school records, no pediatrician, just a designation, A27. The further I went into the file, the colder I felt. There were forms filled out in all caps, like they were pulled from old military templates. Behavioral evaluation, stimulus controlled, phase 1 immersive intention approved, speech delay intentional, do not redress. These weren't the words of adoption professionals. They read like someone cataloging equipment. I started to pull tax records on the estate. Nothing new. But then I filtered for property renovations filed with the city. In 2013, there was a permit, X-edited and sealed from public access, listed as structural adjustment, vibration reduction, soundproofing. Buried in the subnotes, sub-level room A, circular wall reconfiguration, ceiling reinforcement for camera rigging. I've walked through dozens of estate blueprints. This room didn't make sense. It wasn't listed on the initial plans, only retroactively added months later. A circle room, no windows, 12 feet underground, with nothing but 3 mounted floor bolts and an overhead lens mount. No plumbing, no airflow system. It wasn't meant for living. It was meant for watching. I checked the estate's ownership, a holding company called Velvet Pulse LLC. The only transaction they had on record for that quarter was a transfer of $120,000, 0 cents, to another shell in Miami, marked post-session treatment, A27 clearance. What the hell was a post-session treatment? I kept digging. The name Velvet Pulse came up again, this time in a completely different context. It was tied to a donor record for a charity event hosted by a famous producer, one with deep ties to the East Coast music scene and known for throwing themed parties that no one was allowed to photograph. The donation wasn't for music or education. It was tagged under silent trauma recovery. It didn't take long to connect the dots. One of the silent board members listed on Velvet Pulse's paperwork had legal representation tied to the Combs estate. It wasn't a direct line, these things never are, but every shell led back to the same cluster of people orbiting that empire. Not the ones you see on red carpets, the ones you never hear about, the financial anchors, the closers, the ones who make files like A27 disappear. But they didn't do a perfect job. One trust transfer from 2014 was labeled Performance Compliance Partial Compensation Phase 3. I'd never seen a trust use the word compliance. It made it sound like the child owed them something, like she had to earn her room and board. And compensation for what, exactly? Children don't perform. Not unless someone makes them. There was one more property I traced, tucked into Coldwater Canyon just outside Beverly Hills. It wasn't listed under any of the shell corps I'd seen so far. This one was owned by a limited trust out of Nassau, registered to a woman with no verifiable identity, a passport with 2 expiration dates, a driver's license that wasn't issued in any state. Still, I pulled the permits. And there it was again. Session, recording room A, temperature regulated, surveillance angle pre-mounted. I requested satellite imagery, ran a structural integrity scan through a third-party drone op I've worked with before. What I saw made my blood run cold. The basement wasn't just a basement. It was symmetrical. Too symmetrical. A central round chamber connected to 6 narrower hallways like spokes. Each hallway was soundproofed with what appeared to be camera installation ports at the end. The central room had no door to the outside. Only an elevator shaft connected it to the upper floors. The place wasn't built for guests, it was built for scenes. Filed everything, locked it behind triple-layer encryption, printed a hard copy and buried it in a fireproof box in the back of my office under a false floor panel. I couldn't prove what they were using those rooms for, not yet. But the financial patterns, the shell signatures, the missing Guardian signature on A27's intake form, they all pointed to one thing. This wasn't a child who slipped through the cracks. This was a child who'd been placed, intentionally, in silence, out of sight. A few nights later, I got a package at my door. No label, no postage, just a flat white envelope with one thing inside. A photo. It was grainy, like a still from an old security tape. A girl, maybe 12 or 13, sitting in the middle of a circular room. The walls were red. The camera hung above her. She was looking straight at it. And in her lap, a sketchbook. She wasn't drawing, she was waiting. On the back of the photo, someone had scrawled in marker, "She never forgot the script." That's when I knew this wasn't an asset file anymore. It was a rehearsal, and she was the only one who remembered how it really went. Chapter 3. She only drew when the music stopped. My hand was back in the socket, and the container kissed only gluten. Forget it. Laughter. I forgot, I said. I never wanted to be in the music industry. Not really, but I grew up around it. My uncle worked live sound for tours in the early 2000s, and by the time I finished community college, I had enough names in my phone to get a job moving cases and keeping my mouth shut. That's what most assistants do. Smile, nod, sign the NDA, and don't look too long at anything that makes your stomach twist. It's easy to pretend you're just part of the machine, just another cog, until one day the machine blinks at you. It was a Thursday. I remember because I was hungover and I hated Thursdays in Bel Air. That's when the pre-weekend setups happened. Last-minute house cleanings, catering inventories, private pickups. I got a call from a blocked number, which wasn't unusual. It was the kind of job where you didn't answer, you just showed up where you were told. The voice on the other end said, "She's at the guest house, Blackgate. Walk her down." That's it, no name, no instructions, just her. I drove to this spot, one of those hilltop rentals with curved driveways and a view too perfect to feel real. The guest house sat at the edge of the property, low and narrow like a modern shoebox. There wasn't a car in the driveway, no movement behind the tinted windows. I half thought they were playing some kind of prank on the new guy, but when I knocked, the door opened like it had been waiting. She was already standing there. Thin, pale, hair tucked behind her ears like she was trying not to be seen. She couldn't have been more than 16, maybe younger, but something about her felt older, like she'd been in rooms I couldn't imagine. Her eyes didn't move like a kid's, they scanned. She held a sketchbook so tight it bent at the spine. Wore soft gray clothes, like the kind you give someone who's supposed to blend into the background. No makeup, no jewelry, just the sketchbook and that look, like she already knew who I was. "You're the ride?" she asked. I nodded, suddenly unsure if I was supposed to talk. She walked past me and got into the car without another word. I followed, started the engine, kept the radio off. Halfway down the driveway, she finally said something. "I'm not the daughter," she whispered. "I'm the draft." I thought I misheard her. Draft? Like a copy? I didn't ask, I just kept driving. The party was already underway when we got to the main house. Not a full crowd, just a curated one. Industry types, the kind that wear sunglasses indoors and speak in phrases like pipeline and alignment. The air smelled like sage and synthetic lemon. She walked herself to one of the side rooms without needing to be told where to go. That was the first thing that made my spine itch. The second was the music. It wasn't loud. Not at first. Just soft, ambient tones pulsing through the walls. Not from speakers you could see, but from somewhere deeper in the architecture. Every room hummed, like the building was breathing. Someone handed me a clipboard with a list of ice restock times, drink rotations, and rune codes. That was normal. What wasn't normal was a line at the bottom. Do not enter staging during active sessions. I didn't think anything of it until later. It must have been close to midnight when I went looking for the coat closet. I'd been chasing a client's assistant who left her phone behind and ended up walking down the wrong hallway. The lights were low, red, velvet curtains instead of doors. I should turn around. But one door was cracked. He interrupted him. Get up. Caliphon, the same at a tessimal, the fruit boat. It had a brass plate. 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 It had. I pushed it open. The room inside didn't belong in that house. It was cold, almost sterile, with walls covered in soft quilted fabric, deep crimson, nearly black in places. The lights were dim, but enough to see the white chair in the center, bolted to the floor, leather, no armrests, and in the far corner, near a small side table, stood her. The girl, the one I picked up. She was drawing. The music was still playing. Something low and repetitive, no melody, just soft synthetic strings looping in a way that made time feel slippery. She didn't look up at me, just kept sketching. Her hands moved fast but precise, like she was capturing something she'd memorized. I backed out, closed the door, told myself it was just a creative session, some kind of visual performance art. These parties always had weird installations. But something about the way she moved haunted me, like she was copying, not creating. Later the music stopped. You don't notice silence until it punches you in the face. The loop cut out all at once, no fade, no warning. I felt the absence before I heard it. I went back to staging, couldn't help myself. The door was wide open now. The chair was empty. But the sketchbook was still on the table. I know I shouldn't have, but I looked. Just one page. 3 men, standing in a line, clapping. No stage, no instruments, no microphones, just the 3 of them, hands frozen mid-applause like a photograph, and in the corner of the drawing, a small camera mounted to the ceiling, pointing down at the spot where the chair had been. She'd drawn the room. Exactly. No other pages, just that one. I left, pretended I never saw it. The next day, my phone was wiped. Contacts, messages, everything. I reported it to IT. They said I must have tripped a security update or pushed a bad sync. But I hadn't touched my settings. And only one app still worked. A blank custom interface that showed a loading screen for hours before vanishing. After that, I stopped working the Bel Air events, asked to be reassigned to street team logistics, anything that kept me out of those houses. But I never forgot what she said. I'm not the daughter, I'm the draft. I think she meant she wasn't the original. She was the template, rehearsed, perfected, discarded. And every time I hear a looped instrumental in a lobby or elevator, my chest tightens. Like somewhere, behind a wall I can't see, someone's sketching applause that no one else can hear. Chapter 4. The other girl at the compound. I came to New Mexico for the sky. That might sound stupid, but I'd been working back-to-back gigs in LA kitchens for years, and the constant clatter of cutlery and Instagram photographers had worn me thin. A friend of mine, also a chef, said there was a gig out in the desert. Private, high-paying, no publicity. They needed someone for quiet cuisine. At the time, that sounded like heaven. The compound wasn't on any map. You had to drive 2 hours past Santa Fe, then another hour down a dirt road with no signs, no markers, just red dust and silence. Then, out of nowhere, this massive adobe-style estate appeared, all smooth stone walls and reinforced windows. It looked like something a reclusive billionaire would build if they had a taste for quiet and control. I was given my own quarters, which wasn't normal for these types of jobs. Most chef contracts like this are kitchen only, no room and board. But this was a full immersion agreement. I had to surrender my phone at the gate, sign a confidentiality notice that was longer than most leases, and agree not to speak to the guests unless spoken to first. The kitchen was already stocked, but not with what I expected. No red meat, no processed sugar, no caffeine. Everything was bland, calming, soft. There were laminated cards on the prep table, recipes for post-session meals, steamed white rice, bone broth, lavender tea, pureed squash, skimmed fish without skin. Everything was broken into categories: pre-session prep, post-session recovery, compliance snacks. I'd never cooked for that kind of schedule before. It was like feeding a therapy ward, only no one ever explained what the sessions were. That first week, I didn't see much. Meals were requested via internal comms. No names, just numbers. I'd plate food, leave it in the holding window, and someone would silently carry it away. The house remained mostly quiet. Too quiet. No televisions, no laughter, just soft jazz playing through the internal speakers 24/7. It looped Miles Davis, then Bill Evans, then some ambient quartet whose name I could never remember, always instrumental, always the same tone, smooth, slow, intentional. Then came the afternoon when everything changed. It was around 4, and I had just finished prepping the next hydration course. Sliced cucumber, mineral water, and a hint of ginger. I stepped out to restock the walk-in, and as I passed the corridor by the lower atrium, I saw them. 2 girls. They were walking in a line, one slightly behind the other, both barefoot. One I recognized immediately, not personally, but from tabloid covers, a daughter of someone famous. She looked dazed, hair damp, eyes puffy, lips parted like she was trying to remember how to breathe. The other girl was different, smaller, thinner, pale. She kept her eyes on the floor as they walked past, arms crossed tightly over her chest. No expression, but she clutched something in one hand, looked like a rag, or maybe a piece of cloth folded over itself. Neither of them spoke. I turned back into the kitchen, unsure if I was even supposed to have seen them. About 15 minutes later, I heard a noise. It wasn't a scream exactly, more like a sharp intake of breath, then another, then muffled voices. The jazz got louder, like someone cranked it up from the main panel. That happened often, moments of tension muffled by volume. Every time I heard a strange noise, the music would swell, like it was designed to overwrite your memory of it. I went back to my station, pretending nothing was wrong. That's how you survive jobs like this. Pretend. That night, as I was cleaning up, I found her again. The quiet girl. She had wandered into the kitchen, barefoot, still clutching that cloth. I almost told her to leave, but something stopped me. She walked up to the prep counter and didn't say a word, just dragged a fingertip across the thin layer of spilled salt near the edge. Slowly, carefully. She drew a spiral, then a stick figure, then bars around it. "Are you hungry?" I asked, unsure what else to say. She didn't look at me, just kept tracing the salt with her finger. Then she said, "Do you cook for ghosts?" The air went still. I didn't answer. I didn't know how. She looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw what was really in her eyes. Not fear, not confusion. Memory. She remembered something I didn't want to know. The next morning, the kitchen smelled off, like burnt rubber. I checked all the burners, the ovens, nothing was on. Then I noticed my cutting board, an old maple slab I brought from LA, stained with years of use. On the side of it, where the wood curved at the edge, a shape had been burned in. The spiral, not carved, burned, as if pressed in with a branding iron. I called maintenance, told them the board was damaged, asked for a replacement. They didn't ask questions, just took it and handed me a new one like it was routine. That night, I tried to leave. Packed my bag, said I had a family emergency, told the operations lead, some guy in all black with no ID badge, that I appreciated the opportunity but needed to go. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. He said, "Remember your ND." I never signed one, I told him. He tilted his head. "Doesn't mean you're not bound." That was the moment I understood. I wasn't hired to cook. I was hired to witness without speaking. The next morning, I was given a 2-week notice contract and paid in cash. No forwarding paperwork, no follow-up calls, just a black envelope in my room with the address of a motel 2 towns over and instructions to stay put for 7 days. I did. But the image of that girl drawing salt spirals on my counter never left me. And now, years later, every time I slice into a fish or stir bone broth, I think about what she asked me. "Do you cook for ghosts?" No, but I think I cooked for their leftovers. The ones still learning how to stay silent. Chapter 5. The rehearsal folders. I wasn't supposed to be in records that night. I don't usually pull overnights, and I'm not one of the senior nurses either. I'm afloat shifts here and there, not high enough in the food chain to be looped into the real client briefings, but always nearby when things start getting too quiet. That's how it is at Luxwell. You get close to the truth by accident. The clinic isn't advertised, there's no street sign, just a clean concrete driveway behind a law office in the hills and a gate that only opens if they're expecting you. High-profile families come here when the usual masks don't stick anymore. CEOs, musicians, public figures, they bring their kids in through the back. Luxwell's specialty isn't healing, it's realignment, reshaping behavior before it causes headlines. That week, we had 6 clients under residential review. 5 were standard. Substance spirals, post-tour meltdowns, anxiety shields cracking. But one wasn't listed in the digital census. No name, no intake photo, just a file number I stumbled across while logging medication receipts. Client code A27-interim, redacted. At first I thought it was a clerical error. We're not even allowed to house clients without formal IDs anymore, not after what happened in 19. But this folder was different, misfiled, wedged between audio aversion trauma and compulsive vocal suppression. I opened it to reslot it. That's when I saw the transcripts. They weren't typed by our usual transcription service. These looked like they'd been transcribed manually, maybe even by hand at first and scanned in later. No formatting, no time codes, just a timestamp up top. Session 3, Room 2C, audio only. The voice logs weren't from a traditional therapy intake. These were memory reconstruction sessions. I remember that term because we stopped using it after a lawsuit in 2017. Too dangerous, too easy to plant suggestions. But someone had brought it back for her. At first, I didn't even know who the girl was. She didn't refer to herself by name, just kept repeating phrases like, "I was there, but not the version they remember," and "I didn't blink wrong, I remembered the line." That line came up 5 times, word for word, in different sessions. I didn't blink wrong, I remembered the line. The phrasing wasn't clinical, it was theatrical, performed, like she was still stuck in the rehearsal. There were references to a room, always the red room. She never described the door, never mentioned furniture, just said the red was for remembering, the blue was for lying, but only the red room had the light that watched. That part stayed with me. She talked about standing still for long periods, about music loops, about something called a compliance tap, which she explained as a rhythmic cue played before and after she was allowed to speak. No therapist asked her how that made her feel. They only noted the precision of her recollection. One clinician even wrote, "high memory fidelity, possible suggestibility," like she was just another study subject. I turned the page and saw a printed image, low resolution, clearly a video still, a girl standing in the middle of a circular room, velvet red walls, a camera mounted above her. Her arms were by her sides, her mouth was open, like she'd just finished saying something. The clinician's note under it read, "Patient claims this is the staging space. She refers to it as where obedience becomes architecture. States she was told not to remember it unless prompted by sound cues. Possibility of implanted recall via tonal training." I felt my stomach drop. That's not trauma. That's training. Another transcript started with her whispering. No prompt, just ambient noise for the first 20 seconds. Said if I say it outside the red room it becomes true, so I never said it. That line kept echoing through my head all night. I took the folder and scanned it quietly on one of the old machines and records that doesn't log activity anymore. I saved it under a generic temp file and emailed it to myself through a burner account. I knew I shouldn't, but there was something in that voice, the way she said it. Not scared, not panicked, conditioned. I went back to the floor that morning and asked around, casually, about the unnumbered client in 2C. No one admitted to seeing her. One of the RNs said that room had been empty since November. Another said they thought it was being used for storage therapy, whatever that meant. I knew they were lying, or maybe they'd just forgotten. A day later, the file was gone. Not just from records, but from the system. My burner email account was locked out. The folder had no digital trace. Only the hard copy I'd printed remained, stuffed under a false bottom in my locker. 2 nights later, someone slid a sheet of paper under my car windshield while I was on shift. No envelope, just a page. A drawing, a spiral, a chair, a stick figure drawn without a face, and in the corner, the same words written in pencil. I didn't blink wrong, I remembered the line. I turned in my resignation the next day, told them I was taking a job out of state. They didn't ask questions. No one ever does at Luxwell. But I still think about her, about the red room, about the fact that some girls don't survive trauma by forgetting it. They survive it by rehearsing it, until someone tells them it's time to stop. And even then, they don't. Chapter 6. The Attack. It wasn't my first time working the Ridgeview estate, but it was the first time it felt like something was coming undone. The energy was strange from the start. Not chaotic, just coiled, like the whole property was holding its breath. I'd worked for big names before, athletes, tech moguls, billionaires with bad habits, but nothing prepared me for the way that house turned cold when he arrived. The moment the SUV rolled past the iron gate, even the birds went quiet. The event was private, just family, or at least that's what we were told. The guest list was handwritten. No external vendors, no catering team besides 3 of us long-timers. Everything kept in-house. I was on patio drink duty, rotating trays of cucumber water and hibiscus tea to keep things looking casual. People smiled, but only in small bursts. You could tell they were calculating every movement, every nod, every word. That's when I saw her. She wasn't on the list, at least not officially. She arrived in a black sedan with no plates, stepped out in a plain gray dress, no makeup, no accessories, except for the sketchbook gripped tight to her side like it was part of her body. Some of the family noticed her immediately. One woman tensed and whispered something to a man in a soft mauve jacket. They both went still, watching her cross the gravel path toward the garden like someone arriving at their own funeral. I'd never seen her before, but I knew who she was. It was in the way the guards looked away when she passed. She didn't stop to greet anyone. She didn't even glance around. Her feet moved like they'd already walked that path 1,000 times, straight past the pool deck, through the white arch into the garden behind the house. That garden wasn't for guests. It was for deals, for whispered threats and quiet negotiations. No cameras out there, just trimmed hedges, tall trees, and the old stone patio near the edge of the property. He followed 10 minutes later. I watched from behind the bar, half hidden by the floral display. He walked with that same deliberate calm he always did, nodding slightly to anyone who caught his eye, wearing a soft beige suit like he didn't need protection. His hands were loose at his sides. No urgency, just direction, as if he knew exactly where she was waiting. I don't know what possessed me to follow. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't see things. I slipped through the utility door, cut across the hallway, and stepped out near the rear hedge line. I kept low, crouched behind the garden wall where the trimmed lavender bushes wouldn't block my line of sight. They were already standing face to face. She held the sketchbook against her chest like a shield. He stood still, hands in his pockets. They didn't yell at first. It was quiet, tense. His mouth moved, sharp and fast, but I couldn't hear the words. Her shoulders were stiff. She wasn't crying, just breathing in hard, shallow pulls, like she was trying to stay rooted. Then I heard her. "I saw the rehearsal room," she said, "and I wasn't supposed to draw it." She raised the sketchbook, flipped it open, held it toward him like a mirror. He didn't look at it. "You're not well," he replied, loud enough for me to hear this time. "You've been told that." She took a step closer. "You made me rehearse silence?" He shook his head. "You're not mine. You were brought in. That's what you were for." He sounded calm, not angry, not cruel, like he was reciting something already decided. "You said if I remembered it outside the room it'd become true." She wasn't shouting, she wasn't pleading, she was just saying it, flat and steady, like this was the performance she'd waited for. He moved fast. One hand lashed out, slapped the sketchbook from her hands. It hit the patio and scattered pages like startled birds. His other hand pushed. Open palm, center of her chest, shoved her back into the stone pillar. She hit it hard. Her head made a sound I'll never forget. For a moment, everything froze. Then the house went silent. Even the breeze stopped. She slid down the stone, knees folding beneath her, arms limp at her sides. Her eyes were open, dazed, like she was somewhere else entirely. One of the pages floated down beside her. A spiral drawn in red pencil, smudged by sweat or maybe blood. I couldn't tell from that far. 2 guards rushed in from the back entrance, moving with the kind of speed they usually reserved for crowd control. He didn't stop them, just turned, smoothed his jacket, and walked back inside. They crouched over her. One picked up the scattered pages without looking, the other helped her stand. She didn't fight them, didn't speak, just walked between them like a puppet whose strings hadn't fully reattached. Within minutes, the staff was summoned. Nothing happened. That's what we were told. There was no altercation. That's what we were expected to repeat. The cameras in the garden were undergoing maintenance. That's what the head of security said with a straight face. And just like that, the house moved on. Dinner was served, music returned. People smiled again, a little too wide, a little too forced. No one mentioned the girl. No one asked where she went. Her name was never spoken. The sketchbook was never found. But later that night, after the last tray was cleared and the lights dimmed in the main hall, I went back out to the garden, just to see. The pillars still had a faint scuff where she hit it, and on the ground nearby, half hidden beneath the base of the lavender, was a torn page, burnt at one edge, just a scrap. But I recognized the handwriting. Red was for remembering. I took it, folded it carefully, slipped it into the lining of my uniform jacket. I don't know what she meant by that line, but I know this. That wasn't the first time she tried to show him the truth. It was just the first time she said it out loud. And the only thing he did was make sure we all stayed quiet. Chapter 7. Echo Compliance File, A27. I've worked at the Records Integrity Annex for 11 years, 10th floor, East Wing, Federal Storage Sector. My title is Senior Archive Technician, but it really just means I babysit sealed boxes, verify checksum signatures, and feed hard drives into machines that no longer have manuals. The kind of job nobody applies for directly. You fall into it after too many transfer requests and not enough confrontations. Most days are quiet. We get subpoenas, old court transcripts, digital evidence slated for non-disclosure shelving. We scan them, we tag them, we seal them. Some of it's routine, most of it is forgettable. But every once in a while, something arrives that makes your breath catch before you've even opened the box. That happened last Tuesday. It was 9:42 a.m. when the courier brought it in. An unmarked parcel about the size of a shoebox. Plain brown wrapping, no postage, just a bright red sticker across the top that said, DOJ Intake, Echo Compliance File, A27. And beneath that, in smaller font, for internal reference only, do not duplicate. I scanned it in, but the system didn't recognize the intake code. No match in the federal taxonomy. That almost never happens. Everything, even the sealed stuff, has some kind of indexed cross-referencing. But this didn't ping anything. Not a trial number, not a district tag, not even a time-stamped docket. It just existed. I took it into room B3 of the isolated processing rooms with sound-dampening walls and a standalone terminal, off-network. The kind they use when handling video evidence too sensitive to hit even the internal servers. I logged the chain of custody, slipped on gloves, and opened the package. Inside was one item, a matte black USB drive. It was labeled in white paint pen, Echo Compliance, A27. No instructions, no redactions, just the drive. I plugged it in. There was only one file on it. A27_final_RE here's his score, cut, OP4. No password, no metadata. Just a video. I hit play. At first it was just black. Then a soft red glow began to pulse like a heartbeat. The camera came into focus slowly, like it had been asleep. I saw the outline of a circular room, velvet-lined walls. The texture was unmistakable. I'd seen renderings of rooms like this before, buried in declassified psychops reports from Cold War intelligence files. Rooms designed to suppress depth perception, minimize acoustic return, distort time. And in the center of that room was a girl, completely still. She was no older than 17, maybe younger. Gray clothing, barefoot, her arms resting at her sides. Not bound, not restrained, but so unnaturally still it made my skin crawl. Her eyes were open, fixed straight ahead. She didn't blink. Then, from somewhere off camera, a single clap echoed through the room. 15 seconds passed. Then a clap. Then another. She didn't flinch. Not once. A metronome ticked quietly in the background, just beneath the audio range most people notice. Except I did. A perfect 60 BPM. Like a hidden conductor pacing her through something invisible. The video lasted 11 minutes. The clapping continued. Then it stopped. The girl exhaled, blinked once, then whispered, "Room complete." That was it. No violence, no action, just her, standing in that red chamber, performing stillness as if her life depended on it. I pulled up the accompanying documents. 2 PDFs labeled Intake and Cycle Class AT7 PF and Trial and Classified PF. The first was a psychological evaluation dated nearly a decade ago, though the exact date had been blacked out. The header read, "On the contrary, memory rehearsal trial A27. The clinician's notes were clinical, sterile, almost cruel in their disconnection. Subject demonstrates high retention under silent conditioning, compliant under red spectrum isolation, speech limited unless prompted by rhythmic cue. Drawings suggest partial breach of memory protocol, recommending post-section erasure or visual suppression therapy." The second document was worse. It wasn't a full trial report, just excerpts. Scattered notes from a closed-door review board, probably one not meant to exist. They referenced multiple echo compliance candidates, a 12, a 27, B4, with minimal detail, all girls, all rehearsed. One line in bold at the bottom of the report chilled me more than anything in the video. "If she draws it, burn it." I didn't know what that meant at first. Then I remembered her hands, how they twitched slightly during the video. Not like nerves, like restraint, like muscle memory trying not to activate. Like she was holding in emotion. A sketch, a drawing. I pulled a still frame from the video. Her at the 11-minute mark, eyes forward, red glow behind her like a halo. I printed it on the high-res printer in the secure room. As it came out, I noticed something strange. The paper was warm, not hot, not freshly printed warm, but lingering, like it had absorbed heat from somewhere else. I touched it with the back of my hand. It almost pulsed. I sealed the drive, returned it to the box, logged the official report as received. Archival-only, non-replicable format. But I didn't send the print to the official shelf. I kept it, folded it once carefully, slipped it into a manila envelope with no markings, tucked it into drawer 12F, my unofficial holding space, where I keep the things that don't fit protocol, but don't deserve to be buried either. There are 6 files in that drawer now, all from sealed packages like this. All girls, all rims, all rehearsals. The 27 isn't the first, and I don't think she'll be the last. Chapter 8. She wasn't the daughter. She was the rehearsal. It came in on a Wednesday. I remember because the building was colder than usual, and the space heater under my desk had finally shorted out. I was 3 hours into scanning sealed filings, most of them juvenile case reviews, a few DNA suppression orders, when I saw it. A manila envelope with no routing sticker, no barcode, just a single word printed in all caps across the top in red ink. Emergency severance filing, Legacy X. I flipped it over. No return address, but the security band hadn't been broken, and the seal at the back still held the DOJ emboss. Official, real, and yet not registered. I logged it in manually. That's what we do when the system doesn't recognize a name or code. I had to input a temporary file name just to open the contents. 3 documents, all unsigned, and 1 video file on a government standard encrypted USB. The request itself was brief, less than a page. It was a motion for custodial disassociation. The language was stripped of emotion, clinical. The girl listed herself as petitioner Legacy X. No other identifiers, no social, no age, no birth certificate, just this. I hereby submit formal request to be disaffiliated from all legal familial designation linked to Sean Combs. I am not property, I am not family, I am not adopted, I am drafted. It wasn't like anything I'd processed before. Even the phrasing was coded. There were embedded metadata tags in the document, like someone had redacted them using a forensic program but left the imprint. I used a clean terminal to view the tag preview. Keywords: session room, memory locking, silent choreography, spiral compliance, draft architecture, tier echo rehearsal, non-conceptual memory grid. I'd never seen tags like that before. They read more like operational templates than anything tied to a child welfare case. I clicked on the USB file just to verify it played, but the screen froze at the load point. I didn't push it. That's protocol with sealed testimony marked voluntary but distressed. You mark it as received, verify technical viability, and move it to dark storage. I filed it under temp XS7, then pushed it to the back-end system for final routing. The case never reappeared. No judge was assigned, no docket created. It was like the motion was swallowed whole. I thought about her for the next few days, this Legacy X, the way her words didn't ask for help or offer tears. They declared, like she wasn't trying to escape him, but correct the record. Erase the lie of her placement. 3 days later, I came in early, and there it was, waiting on my desk. No envelope, no folder, just a black sketchbook, old, scuffed around the corners, pages warped like it had been handled too many times. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. The first few pages were symbols, spirals inside spirals, sketches of circular rooms with no doors, stick figures under overhead lights, pages layered with annotations like choreography diagrams, lines tracing movements around invisible cameras. Then, halfway through, the faces started. Eyes erased, mouths drawn as slashes, no one smiling. One page showed a man clapping, alone in a red room. Another showed a girl in a chair with mirrors on all sides. She wasn't drawn in distress. She wasn't even looking up, just still, passive, blank. Then I reached the final page. It was a courtroom, drawn with eerie precision, the same layout as the 6C hearing chamber we use for high-risk juvenile petitions. Every row of seats was empty. The judge's bench was vacant. Witness stand unoccupied. But in the center of the courtroom, on the floor where no one sits, was her. The girl, older now, hair pulled back, sketchbook open in her lap. She wasn't speaking. She was drawing. Below the image, in her unmistakable hand, were the words, "You wanted performance, so I rehearsed justice." I felt something press down in my chest, like I was remembering a verdict that had never been read, like I'd been in that room before, but from a different angle. And then it hit me. I had seen this sketchbook before. Not this exact one, but one just like it. Years ago, different name, different case, another girl with no birth certificate and a tendency to draw spirals in court margins. She'd filed a sealed affidavit that vanished within days, said her memories weren't hers, said she was trained for silence, not consent. Back then, I thought she was just broken. Now, I think she was trying to warn us. He closed the sketchbook, logged no record of it. Filed it in my personal archive. Bottom drawer, beneath the old circuit sheets and obsolete caseload microfiches. No barcode, no cross-reference, so just a sticky note across the spine that says, "Do not file under family." Because she wasn't the daughter. She was the rehearsal. And she finished the performance in a courtroom no one stayed to watch.